In this video, we're going to look at how to keep your Rails installation up to date. So when we originally installed Rails, one of the commands we issued once we got Ruby gems installed was this command right here. Gem install Rails -- include - dependencies. In order to update our Rails installation, we simply reissue that command. Now, if you get an error at this point of this trying to install and it says permission denied, you'll have to run this as you see here, and that's why I did that. You'll have to run it as super user, so you can do an sudo command, which stands for super user do. Then reissue the command. It's going to ask you for your administrator password. We're going to go ahead and enter it. Now we have to wait for this download to happen, so we're going to have to wait. Now as you see, it says it's successfully installed, which means my Rails, in this case, framework is up to date. On your machine, if you aren't up to the current Rails, it's going to download several packages and install them, and it'll take 3 or 4 minutes depending on your internet connection to actually do that. The next step that we have to do is actually update our individual Rails applications. And you want to be a little cautious in doing this because it will overwrite some files if you just let it go. And some of those files may be important to you in that you've added things to them. And one of the files is your database.yaml file. If you let that file be overwritten, you won't be able to connect to your database. So you need to either not overwrite it or let it be overwritten and go back and modify that file after you updated your application's Rails framework. So I'm going to go ahead and go into Cookbook here, our little Cookbook application we've been playing with. And the command to actually update the Rails framework for a particular Rails application is Rails and then a period, and hit the enter key there, and it already says it exists. It's going to try to overwrite my database YML file, you see that, and I'm going to say no in this case because I know it's okay. It's going to try to write the dispatch file. That's fine, we'll let it do that. And all these other ones you could actually let it go ahead and overwrite them. And developmental log, we're not really too concerned about. And now my application is upgraded to the latest version of Rails. So let's go ahead and start it by doing script server. And again, just a reminder, and we'll cover this in other videos more in depth, the script part of that command is actually a directory. Then inside of it is a command of server, which runs our WebBrick server, which is our Ruby-based web server. And here we go, our application URL, but I already have this up and running here. And let's go ahead and do a refresh. Hopefully this list comes up. So our little application is now updated to the current version of Rails. Now, there's one other thing with Rails in that, as many open source projects have, there is a development portion of Rails that has additional new features that the developers are working on currently, and they call that project Edge Rails. And if you actually want to experiment around with Edge Rails and see what the developers are putting into the newer versions of Rails before they're actually production ready, you can do that. And how it's done is that individual applications are updated to Edge Rails. You don't update your actual main library, and you do that by saying rake freeze edge in the directory of your application. So I'm going to go out here up one level, and I'm going to create a little demo app, Rails demo app. So in later videos we'll talk about this command a little bit more in depth. And this command just creates us our Rails application framework that we can go and work in. So I'm going to switch into there. And the reason I did that now is so I can issue this rake freeze edge command. And before I do that, I'm going to show you one folder. There is a vendor folder here, and if we look in here, there's nothing in here at the moment. I'm going to go up one level, and I'm going to issue that rake freeze _edge command, and it's going to do some stuff and install into that vendor folder the current developmental version of Rails. And you saw fly by on the screen there what version, developmental version of Rails that this is, and 4.5.2.6 in this case. This command can also be issued if you want to select a particular version of edge rails, you issue that same command, the rake freeze edge, and then after it you give it a version number, and then it'll download that particular version of Rails and put it into your vendor directory. Now we've downloaded that current version. If we go into that vendor directory and take a look, now you'll see there's a Rails folder in there. And this is the entire Rails library. Now the interesting part of this is that you can go in there and dig around and find out what Rails works at, or how Rails works at the different levels. Pretty easy. It's probably a good way to understand the Rails library, what's going on with the framework and such. Now at this point, this application is, when I start it, let's go ahead and do script server at one more level. It will be running the latest version, developmental version of Rails. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the URL, switch back over to my browser. Let's open a new window. I'm going to like that. There we go. Now, as you can see, that application's up and running, so my little experiment to play around with developmental version of Rails is working fine. Now let's check one other thing. Let's go back to our cookbook application and go down into that vendor directory, and you'll see that in that application's vendor directory, in this case it's the cookbook application, our vendor directory just has the plugin. So this project, this Rails application, has not been updated to Edge Rails. So it's important to understand that if you're going to play around on the edge, you do that application by application.